This is the Skin in the Game VC podcast, hosted by Tom Wallace, entrepreneur turned venture capitalist and the managing partner at Florida Funders, along with Saxon Baum, general partner and head of investor relations at Florida Funders. You'll learn from the best about investing in early stage tech companies, so you too can gain the confidence and find the tools that help you succeed as an angel investor. Are you ready to get some skin in the game?
Welcome, everybody. This is Tom Wallace, and I'm excited to have you here for another episode of our Skin in the Game podcast at Florida Funders. I've got Saxon Baum with me, my co-host. Hey, Sax.
How we doing, Tom?
Great,
Coming
buddy.
live
How
from
are you?
Florida. How's life in Utah? Enjoying the summer out there?
Yeah, it's great out here. Sorry about your appendix, buddy. Had a rough week, didn't you?
You know, I go out to Napa for a great vacation. I think I'm the only person to go to Napa to actually not have a glass of wine. And to get everybody up to speed, I had to have an emergency appendectomy in San Francisco. Luckily, they only took the appendix, so I'm back to about 95% now. But thanks for asking.
Well, glad it wasn't worse, but sorry about your situation. Anyway, really excited about our guest today, and we have with us one of our founders. And if anybody knows anything about Florida Funders, we are passionate, crazy about founders and entrepreneurs because we are all those things ourselves. So that's one of the fun things about our business is we get to work with these bright, young, talented people who are working really hard to pursue their dreams and change the world. And we've got a great founder with us today. So with that, I'd like to introduce Patrick. Actually, Patrick, I'd rather you introduce yourself. So welcome to the podcast, and tell our audience about yourself, and a little bit about your background. Awesome. And about your company, Togal.
Sure. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for having me on. Honor to be on here. Love you both and love Florida Funders. So you guys are awesome to work with. So thank you. Quick background. I'm born and raised in the Florida Keys, grew up in a family business in construction, worked in all aspects of that business, worked in the field, worked in estimating, got to do, quite a bit and see a lot in construction. CPA by training. I worked at Deloitte for a few years. 2010 BP oil spill happened. And I'm sure you all remember there's talk of that loop current, the oil getting a loop current coming through the Florida Keys where I was from. I was worried about it, started a little environmental cleanup company. That opened my eyes to government, what was happening, and in part inspired me to run for Congress. So ended up, had a great team and won in 2012, served in Congress for a couple terms. I was
U.S. Congress, right? Not the state of Florida.
Congress. And wow. I was the youngest member at the time. And I was on the Financial Services Committee and the Intelligence Committee, and was part of a group called Future Forum. And the idea and the thought was, especially being one of the youngest member, was we really need to start focusing on the jobs of tomorrow. Living in the middle of this technological revolution, industrial revolution that we're in, right? This new turning. What is the government in our country doing to prepare for the jobs of tomorrow with AI and the sharing economy and things changing so quickly? And as we all know, government moves slow and there's still not enough happening at the federal level. So anyway, I was blessed, got exposed to a lot of new things, new ideas, and learned a lot. Fast forward, rejoined the family business. I'd been gone, 12 years or whatever, and we're lucky to be in a great market in Florida. Business has grown to become the largest general contractor in Florida. But I realized that nothing had changed in the 12 years I'd been gone, right? Same old processes. Right?
Well, the construction industry is kind of known to be slow to adopt new technology. At least that's always been my perception. Is that accurate?
It's not just your perception, it's the reality. McKinsey actually did a study, and they showed that over the last 50 years, there's been a 0% increase in productivity in construction. Compared to every other industry, that's 2x, 3x, 10x improvement. Construction's remained flat. So it is ripe for innovation. Yeah. So carrying on with that thought process, started thinking about, gosh, what can we do to innovate, to improve efficiencies? And I started going through our financials with our CFO, and was reminded that the single biggest piece of overhead in our business, similar to most construction companies, is estimating. right? Contractors are constantly getting plans and asked to price those plans, and they bid on work and they, win their fair share, but you're constantly bidding on work. There's constantly revisions, happening in the process. And part of that estimation process is called a takeoff or a square foot analysis. And I grew up doing that with my grandfather, and we used a scale ruler like this, right? And I had a yellow pad, and I would sit there and I would, measure, how much drywall there is and how much paint there is and flooring and, everything else that goes into a job. And you literally have to go and quantify every single piece that's in a building. And then you assign a price to it and you give a number. And you do that over and over. And as we all know, rarely is it just one contractor that bids on a job. It's usually 3 or 4. And it's not just one electrician, it's 3 or 4, and plumbers and roofers and, windows and doors and everything else. So you have hundreds of people doing the exact same process on every single job that's built. And it happens over and over because there's revisions. So anyway, light bulb went off that, holy cow. If a human can look at a set of plans and determine the difference in a bedroom and a bathroom and a hallway, then so can a computer if you train it correctly. So let's use AI to automate that process. So anyway, that's when the idea of Togal came about. And side, sort of trivia here, the word Togalai, Togalai, means builder in the Irish language Gaelic. And I'm a little bit Irish, Patrick Aaron Murphy. So AI, it worked out all right.
Patrick,
I'm a little Irish too, but I would have never come up with that.
Patrick, you guys, you were AI before everybody in the world thought AI was the hottest thing, right? The company's been around for about 5 years since inception. Talk a little bit about what you saw then and what you see now in terms of AI tools, being so deep in the AI world. What's kind of the core differentiators that you see now with the AI market?
Number one, just the press and the atmosphere and the market around it. Raising money and talking about AI in 2019 was very different than it is now. And that's good and bad. The downside is a lot of people expect and they think AI is going to do everything for you. It's going to mow your lawn, walk your dog, clean your house. It's doing a lot, but that's reason.
Can it find me a girlfriend?
Yeah.
I was going to say, Tom, there's something applicable there.
We're gonna have a whole podcast on that, right? The future.
Yeah, right. Let's not get down. We don't want to get down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. But then on the technical side, there is every day, I think, more talent entering the industry and more folks capable of solving the problem. I think on the technical side, though, as well, that the tools that we were using, the amount of data, for example, that we had to train on 5 years ago versus now is very different, right? And the consistency of that data had to be a lot more precise than it is now, right? The models are getting better, it's getting smarter and getting faster. So it is getting easier, like I think anything that's developing to build, but there's still plenty of barriers to entry.
Data is such a big. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Data is such a big part of AI and these large language models. Where do you guys get your data that you train, your AI on?
Great question. I actually just wrote an op-ed on this very topic. So I guess a lot of things to talk about here. We are blessed to have a construction company that had a lot of plans. We originally, one of the reasons we wanted to go raise money was to make sure that we are getting a diverse set of data from architects, from engineers, from subcontractors, developers all over the world that has access to data all over the world and different product type, not just commercial or not just residential, but all sorts of different product types. So the models we built are trained on everything, on every, in every, many languages. So it was important for us to get investors that were then willing to share their information with us. So we had a head start there, knowing the industry and folks that could share that information. Then, of course, we're able to get some online. The quality of that is, questionable sometimes, but able to get that. And then we actually had to hire 25 architects and engineers to label that data in a very consistent manner. And we had some learnings, of course, along the way of how we had to label that and train it and all. But that's part of the fun, right?
Yeah.
Patrick, you guys, once again, have been doing this for 5 years. And when Tom and I now look at AI companies, it's a lot easier to get from 0 to 1 than it was for you guys. So you guys had to do a lot more work then. Is there a technical moat these days with AI companies, or is it everybody has access to tools like ChatGPT, so there's less of this technical moat, or is data the moat? What's the proprietary piece with these AI companies?
I think it depends on the type of AI, quote unquote, and the industry you're going into. In construction, the moat is still pretty big because you can't just go online and buy, 100,000 trained or labeled plans. That doesn't exist. You go get a lot of pictures of stop signs or cats or dogs, but there's not a lot of construction plans that are out there. And a lot of that gets into privacy, which is what I wrote the op-ed on. I sort of compared it to Hollywood and the equivalency of how actors and writers are worried about AI copying previous episodes or characters and AI training on that, and then writing new episodes and characters based on very closely to that, right? And so who gets credit there? And the same thing I believe is going to happen in architecture, construction, real estate very soon, where AI is going to be able to train on tens or hundreds of thousands of previous buildings that have been built and plans that have been designed, and then draw something new and do it maybe similar enough that you might recognize it, maybe you don't, but an architect may say, hey, wait a minute, I drew a facade very similar to that, and I came up with that roof structure, and that's a copy. And then who's liable there? Like what happens there? And I think Hollywood is somewhat leading the way in the law that ends up being written around that. I think that case law will have massive ramifications for even industries like construction. So Saxon, I think real estate construction is a laggard. So the moat is still bigger, but no doubt it is getting easier and easier. The models are getting smarter and smarter. You need less and less information.
Hey, Patrick, if we want to read your op-ed piece, which I do now that I'm listening to you, and I'm sure some of our audience does, how can we get access to that?
I will share it. I went for the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. I didn't pick it up, unfortunately. So, I will share it with you and the viewers. But
it's hanging on your fridge, right? It's the same thing I do with my daughter's artwork, right? It's on the fridge.
Yeah. My it's actually my mom's fridge. Yeah, that's what she's
perfect. So Tom hit on this earlier, but one thing that concerns us as investors sometimes is breaking user behavior in antiquated industries. So construction, as you said, there hasn't been much change over the last 50 years. Productivity is still low. How do you sell in this antiquated industry? What gets buyers excited? What gets these buyers to break user behavior and to break workflow that they're used to?
Great question. And it's probably one of the most important things for us to focus on as a construction tech company. And I'd say that's the same for any tech company going into an antiquated industry that isn't tech first, right? Where the users aren't necessarily desperate for technology or searching for it every day. It's almost the opposite in some ways. So we've actually changed our sales cadence as well, where we don't focus on the AI. And instead, we talk about the basics of the product and how it is similar to what they're used to. Modern interface, web-based. Here's the capabilities that because it's web-based, we can do. And then, by the way, at the end, here's the icing on the cake, AI. Right. So we set expectations because we learned that's telling people it's AI in the beginning. Oh, it's going to do my whole job. I don't need to come to work next week. Right. This is great. Yeah, look, we save you, 4 or 5 hours a day, probably. You're not bad, but there is still some work you have to do. Now, in 5 years, who knows? But so what we found is the sales cadence, to your point, Saxon, has changed for us, but also the customer success onboarding. That first 15 to 30 minutes of onboarding a customer is critical for us to make sure that they understand just the basic blocking and tackling and the buttons and the placement and the workflow. And if we get someone to do that 30-minute onboarding, they are, knock on wood, they're hooked, right? They love the platform. They're not going back. They're getting rid of their old stuff. But to get someone online where we have no conversation with them, they come and they try to use it on their own, it can be a little bumpy, right? Because it's a little bit of a new workflow for them.
What's your target customer, Patrick? Is it enterprise construction companies like your family business, or is it SMB? Or I wonder, because I built a house a number of years ago with a general contractor on the residential side, and oh my God, it literally they didn't even use spreadsheets. It was ridiculous. So I'm kind of curious on Who the early adopters are in your space?
25% of the market literally still uses this. Printed plans and this. I promise. 75% is on a computer screen, and there's a couple softwares that are 25 years old or so. And it's the same thing as this, Tom. It's just with a mouse, right? So they click the four corners of a room and they go
AutoCAD, or they basically using AutoCAD?
And so it's another interesting dynamic. Architects will design, of course, an AutoCAD, Revit, but they don't share that file type with contractors because they don't want people to change it. If someone changed it accidentally, major liability, major issues, especially when permitting and governments and, all sorts of compliance are involved in that. So they send it all PDF. So 99% of our customers are using PDF. We can process any image. It can be a JPEG. It can be a CAD file. It could be a picture on a napkin if you wanted, right? We're reading the pixels, but most of our customers are PDF. And what's really cool about Togal and who we're marketing to is it's everybody. And I know that probably sounds crazy, but I often argue that we add more value to the mom and pop contractor that's doing 10 or 20, $50 million a year and has a few employees, and they're trying to grow. And in order for them to grow, they've got to bid on more work, right? You got to win more work. Well, how do you bid on more work? You got to do more estimates. How do you do more estimates? Well, until Togal, you had to go hire an $80,000 a year estimator to do the takeoffs, right? To sit there and count everything so you could put a price for it. With Togal now, all of a sudden, you can bid on 10x more work with a click of a button for $3,000 a year, right? So it's not that huge expense. So I believe we're helping that mom and pop grow and scale, win more work, bid on more work without the huge burden of having to hire several folks. Now, we are blessed to also be at the other end of the spectrum. And some of our large enterprise customers are doing $8 to $10 billion a year. We have hundreds of licenses with them. And
I hope you're charging them more than $3,000 a year.
A little bit more. And some of the things that they like, for example, is the collaboration. Imagine until Togal came about, these companies were emailing the same exact set of plans to hundreds of people within their company, downloading the file to the hard drive, relabeling it, naming it, storing it. It's a cluster, right? So with Togal, it's Google Sheets, but for a set of plans, right? So now all of a sudden we're all live. The three of us can be live, looking at a set of plans, talking about it in real time, making comments, edits, estimating, etc. It sounds simple for the three of us, but that's never happened in construction, right? So the enterprise customers really like features like that on top of the AI.
Yep, that makes sense. Patrick, company that your family started, traditional construction company, now running a tech company. Talk a little bit about the differences that you see, maybe from a cultural standpoint, maybe from efficiency, acceleration standpoint. What are kind of some of the core differentiators? Traditional construction company, high growth, venture backed, early stage tech company.
I always sort of joke with people that startups are very similar to politics, actually.
That might be the first time I've heard that, by the way.
I guess I'm a glutton for punishment. First CPA, then politics, now startup. It's like, what am I thinking? I don't know. I'm like running into walls constantly. But in politics, just to go with that analogy quickly, you have a vision. There's something you're passionate about. You have an idea similar to a startup, and you have to go build a team, right? And you're raising money in either donations in politics or investors, right, in a startup. And I sort of equate your beta version to a primary, where it's the first time you get to kind of hear from the voters or hear from users on the product, on the idea, on the vision, get some feedback. And then you go to release, right? Your V1 product, and you're in the market. And that's like election day. It's out there now, and you're going to see what happens and see how it's received. And then, of course, now theoretically you win the office or your product is successful, and you get to iterate. And you get to modify it, and you have a re-election, you have a new launch, right? But you're constantly raising money. You're constantly building that team. You're constantly continuing to look toward the future. So interesting, some of the comparisons there. With construction, I actually don't think there's a lot of comparisons and similarities. And again, I'm blessed, Saxon, that I was part of a family business. My dad, who started the business, would probably see a lot of the similarities that we're going through with Togo, because he started from zero.
Yeah, he was one that did that 0 to 1.
He did the 0 to 1, and he tells me, and he's told me my whole life, and he was told by folks that 0 to 1 is harder than 1 to 10. Yeah. Right. That's the tough part. Yep. And there's challenges along the way, but it does get a little bit easier. So again, maybe if my dad was on, he could answer that question and see some of those similarities. But my perspective is it is pretty similar to politics.
Well, and what about the state of Florida? I mean, you're obviously very involved in the state of Florida, political leader at one point, but family's very involved with a really large construction company. What have you seen in terms of the changes of the state of Florida now being a very tech forward state, which, as Tom and I always talk about, always wasn't the case?
Yep. I think it's great for the state. And I think Florida continues to be a leader in many ways. We were reliant so much on real estate and tourism, really, right? I mean, that's what drove so much of Florida's economy. And we saw what happens in the last downturn. And when you're so reliant, it's a pretty big downturn, right, when it hits. And we're not quite there yet, but we have diversified our economy and getting new jobs, new backgrounds. I think that's good for the community in many ways, not just, for the sake of a downturn or on the upside of that, but the different cultures that are coming in, the different backgrounds, the educational institutions. I read recently that Vanderbilt's looking at $600 million.
Yeah, I saw that in Palm
right?
Beach. They want to build this campus. Yeah,
right, a new campus. And so, these are all, I think, driven by a lot of the dynamics in Florida. So I'm of course very bullish on Florida. Of course, we have things to worry about and won't get into climate change and insurance and all that stuff. But these are all exciting challenges. I think actually technology and construction and sustainability can help address and continue to make us a prosperous state.
Well, I think the other thing, we've got, we did really well coming out of COVID, and we were open and everybody was closed. And even though we have our challenges with climate change and insurance, some of those all states do. And I think, whether I'm not political, but I think our government's been I think the state government at the Florida level is very pro-business. So that's something we have going for us versus places like California, where it's really challenging to do business, and there's a lot of regulation, there's a lot of red tape, and so I think we're ahead there. I was going to ask you this because I'm kind of curious on the construction. I was going to ask you where you see Togo in 5 years, but just the construction industry as a whole. I follow Elon a lot, as most of us in tech do, and he says, we're going to have these robo taxis here. He's going to make a big announcement coming up. But his humanoid robot, what is it called? Optimus, is he's saying that's going to be a big thing and huge. And the question is when. And Elon's notorious for kind of overpromising on that not hitting the dates. But when I look at the construction industry and so many industries in the U.S., labor shortage is a big problem, right? And I got to believe that's huge in construction, right? So when do you see actual potential, or do you see robots replacing humans in terms of building, buildings and out there working in the field? Or have you thought about that?
I'm so excited about the future of construction and real estate with technology. And I'll break this down maybe in a couple ways. First, I would say, and what I know better is AI than I do robots, but they come together.
Oh yeah, very tight.
In 5 to 10 years, I believe, and you asked indirectly, I guess, about the future of Togal. What I believe is in 5 to 10 years, if you want to build a new building, whether that's a house or a high-rise condo, you're going to have 3 inputs. What's the address, what's the budget, and what's the style? And with those 3 inputs, you're going to get back a set of not just architectural drawings with a pretty facade and design, but you're going to get your working engineering, right? Your plumbing, your mechanical, your electrical, your structural drawings that are all up to code and up to that local spec that's needed. And that's transformational, because today, Tom, if you want to go build a new house or a condo, it's 18 months to 2 years, most likely, by the time you can break ground on that, right? There's the architecture, there's the engineering, there's the approvals, the revisions, right? It's a long process. And so to be able to reduce that from years down to weeks or months is transformational. right? I mean, that's a big difference. And the cost that goes into pre-construction and the thousands of jobs that sort of die on the vine during that time frame because of maybe an economic cycle or interest rates or money or whatever happens changing markets, all of a sudden that changes. And now jobs are getting built a lot faster and for less expensive. And for the workforce housing crisis we have and housing crisis we have in this country, if we could add 20% more inventory a year at a lower cost, that's a really big deal, right? And there's only so many inputs in construction, right? Your land is your land. I mean, okay, maybe it comes down at some point, or maybe there's some pockets, but it's pretty expensive, right? The cost of materials, there's some new materials coming out and some things there. And then you have labor. So if we can help save on the design and architecture of those buildings, which is where I believe our company is going and needs to go and the future is. But then on the other end of the spectrum, the actual installation of those buildings and who's doing it, it's humans today. And it's tough work environment, right? They're working very long hours. It's incredibly difficult and hot and noisy and dangerous. And we need more skilled laborers, and we need more labor in general. And there continues to be a deficit of skilled employees. So will robots fill a void there? 100% they will. And we've already seen it with some of the more simple things like painting. I'm not saying painting simple, but things that you can imagine being done with a robot, painting, installation of drywall, stacking of bricks and blocks, those kind of things. I think you're always going to have skilled labor. And hopefully what this does is that basic entry level redundant job is replaced by a robot, but the higher skilled, higher paying quality job is done by the human, right? That real attention to detail. And that's good for society, right? So on the AI thing I talked about a second ago, that leads to more creativity, more innovation, more sustainability, better designs, humans using their brain power for the creativity, not the mundane, boring stuff. Same thing with construction. Instead of doing the boring painting, go focus on the art of painting, right? And the beautiful part of it.
The creativity side of everything. What do you think? What do you think about 3D printing? Tom, I know you watch 60 Minutes as do I. There was a really, really interesting segment a few weeks ago about 3D printed houses. I believe it's a company out of Austin, Texas. They now have the first 3D printed residential neighborhood, kind of subdivision. Have you been following this at all? And where does 3D printing fall into this? Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yes. Look, I'm a supporter of all updates, improvements to construction. And I think 3D printed homes has a place and there is a role for it. Do I think it's going to transform the industry? No. Yeah. And happy to talk more about it.
But in that example, it was low end. It was like low end housing, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was government subsidized housing.
Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
And no. And I think like anything, there's a highest and best use for certain things. And for 3D print, there's a really good use case for it. There are some really cool prefab and modular construction that's taking place. I think to the extent that you can get more construction done in a controlled environment warehouse, shipped to site and installed, the better for all the obvious reasons.
Sort of like the pieces coming together somewhere else and you bring it. We're seeing a lot of that modular type
some
of art.
Really cool companies are prefabricating bathrooms and kitchens and laundry rooms. And as we're starting to build these high rise, you're just flying them in, plug and play. And every tile in that bathroom that's done in a warehouse is perfect. Like you look in a corner and the tile, it's like a little sliver of a piece and there's a bunch of grout and it's like, oh God, that's silly. Why'd they do it like that? All those mistakes are fixed, right? When you can do it in a controlled environment. That's just a simple example. But there's a lot of really cool new technologies. And if you think about construction from the, sort of 100,000 foot view, there's only 3 materials to build out of, right? Concrete, metal, and wood. It hasn't changed in 100 years, right? That's basically the way it's been. And not to get too far off track, but if you look behind me, these blocks here, and for those that aren't on camera, we have been working for the last 15 years on the 4th way to build. It's called RENCO. It stands for Renewable Composites. It's recycled glass, recycled plastic, calcite, which is like a limestone dust, and then a resin that holds it all together. And these blocks are replacing concrete, metal, and wood for the structure of a building. So it's the fourth fully approved way to build. Hurricane approval, seismic approval, fire, water, off gas, everything, 15 years of testing we've had to go through. And now we're building buildings out of this. So this is just one.
How does that compare cost-wise to traditional brick?
It's about 20% less expensive than
concrete.
Wow. 20% less expensive.
That's exciting.
Now, are you guys manufacturing this?
We are. Yes,
awesome.
Originally the plant, first plant was in Turkey, and now we have one in Palm Beach, Florida.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah,
very exciting. How big is this plant? How many people work there?
Well, it's quite a few robotic arms and automation, of course. So numerous shifts, but it's upwards of 50 people. And we can produce the equivalent of 9,000 apartment units a year from there. 9,000, 1,000 square foot apartments a year.
That's super exciting.
Yeah.
So back to the 5 years out for Togal, where are you taking Togal? How big are you going to, do you want to take this company? Do you see it being public someday? What's the long-term vision look like there?
So sometimes, I'd like to almost compare it to an iceberg, where what we've released now is the tip of the iceberg. And in construction, in real estate, everything starts with a set of plans, right? That's the beginning of it. From your estimating, your budget, your schedule, the actual construction and how you build it, the carbon footprint of that building, the warranty, the insurance, right? The whole lifespan starts with a set of plans. So there are so many chapters to this story, I believe. One of the things, and I've talked to Saxon about this quite recently, is how do we make sure we stay focused on that tip of the iceberg I mentioned, which is the estimating component of it, which is a really big tip of the iceberg, right? And there's a really big market there, and making sure that that's successful. And that's the number one priority, that we do a really good job there. But because of the data that we have and we're getting, this flywheel all of a sudden is picking up steam, and we're getting a tremendous amount of labeled data, which enables us to build some really exciting generative models. And we're making some really exciting hires in the machine vision generative space that will enable us to do what I mentioned earlier, where a user can put those three inputs, the address, the budget, and the style, and we will be designing the actual mechanical, electrical, plumbing, structural drawings for people. And we're actually doing it with plumbing for 2,500-ish square foot home. So you give us a set of plans for a home, and we can start to predict what the plumbing layout is going to be with really good certainty. So that to me is really exciting, right? Because you're really now starting to compress the time it takes on the design side. So that's huge, right? And I could talk about that all day. Another sort of idea that we've started working on and actually have a product and market is called codecomply.ai. And this is taking the essence of Togal, the understanding of plans and the spaces and the distances, and overlaying thousands of pages of local code compliance, your fire, your life safety, your ADA, the wheelchair turnaround, all the different code that goes into getting a building approved and automating that. So instead of taking months to get approvals for your fire, your egress, your travel distances and fire spring, now we're doing it automatically. So again, just another use case for this. So
and you've spun that off into a separate company, right?
We did, yes. That's a sister company, yes.
Okay.
So the idea, I guess, number one is let's go build a really successful, big takeoff estimating company. We can do a lot of exciting things. We're currently in 32 countries, have about, roughly 5,000 users using Togal. There's a long way to go, right? It's a really big market. There's 1 million or so estimators in the country. So we haven't even touched the market yet. So heads down, focused on growing that business. But let's not forget about the R&D, using that data to revolutionize the industry and do something very big by compressing the amount of time it takes to design a building and getting more product out there, because that really changes the world, right? Getting more people into affordable homes.
Well, and I think too, you and I have talked about the technology is being pointed in one direction with Togal, another direction with CodeComply, but there is sort of this ubiquitous layer of technology that's applicable to that entire, nonlinear stack of getting a building built. And so, as you and I spoke about, there's a lot of opportunity to leverage this platform.
There is. We get, calls all the day from insurance companies and attorneys and property managers, right? And there's just so many ways to use that core platform, that core AI engine for all sorts of ancillary use cases. And this is, I think, presents a challenge and an opportunity, right? You don't want to get too distracted, but you don't want to ignore a big revenue stream that's right under your nose.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we always talk about focus, be laser focused, but when the opportunity is there, you gotta make sure that you take a look at it and see if it's worth a little diversion.
Yeah, exactly. So luckily we have friends like you to help advise, and
that's what we're here for.
Stay out of trouble. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the two biggest mistake founders make, CEOs make, I think, as a whole, are lack of focus. Mm-hmm. And the second is hanging on to the wrong hires too long. Mm-hmm. That seems to be the two mistakes we see people make. Mm-hmm. How Elon does it, where he's spread so thin, he's the exception. But this is super exciting. I mean, we're really excited to be along for the ride with you at Togal, and where the future is going. And like you said in the beginning, construction is so ripe. This industry is so ripe for disruption and for digitizing the industry, and you guys are leading the way. We're super excited to be part of the journey. Zach, you got anything else?
No, that's all. Just wanted to thank you, Patrick.
Wait, we got to do the lightning round.
Oh, go ahead, Tom. I didn't know you were prepared for a lightning round.
Yeah.
Come on, Zach.
No, I know. I haven't seen you in a while. I don't know what you're doing out there in Utah.
So, Patrick, this is just real quick. I'm going to ask you quick questions, quick answers. And so
I'm a politician, don't forget, so I can filibuster a little bit.
Well, I'm going to start with that one. Who wins the election, Kamala or Trump?
50-50, going to be razor thin, but I think Democrats and Kamala have the momentum, so I'd put my money with them.
Okay. All right. I always like to ask people, so Bitcoin, where do you see Bitcoin in 5 years? Is it 0, 100 grand, $1 million?
Higher than it is today, for sure. I think the utility makes too much sense for it not to continue growing.
Okay. So, we got Jerome Powell out there in Jackson Hole right now telling us whether we're going to get a rate increase here or, decrease in interest rates. So are we going to do a soft landing, recession, or neither one?
You're getting some tough questions here. I think there's at least a quarter point, maybe 50 basis point drop right in September. I think that will continue stimulating the economy, not just real estate, but many sectors. So I'm going with soft landing. We continue to grow. We've been, leading all developed countries, economically speaking, as we have come out of COVID, and I think that will continue to be true.
All right. And speaking of interest rates, mortgage rates are so tied to construction. Do you see interest rates going back to 2-3%, or do you think this is kind of the new norm, or which actually historically is around the norm, right?
Historically speaking, we're not in a bad place. However, we've gotten accustomed to cheap money, cheap debt, right? So I believe it'll be down closer to 4, right? Which I think is a decent drop from where we're at. But 2%, I think is going to be well before we see that again.
Okay. And then my last one, I love to ask people this question because I've been in technology for 4 decades and gray hair to show for it. And every new wave of technology, whether it was computers, microcomputers, the internet, it was always like, hey, this is going to replace jobs. Is AI going to replace jobs or create jobs, or is it going to be job neutral overall?
I'm very confident it's going to grow our economy and add jobs. I understand the fear around it. We heard that around ATMs, right? We heard it around cars, computers, right? We've continued to hear this. There's more, bank tellers than ever before, right? We're going to come up with so many new jobs that the three of us could never even dream of in the next 5 to 10 years because of AI and crypto and so many of the other, new technologies that are out there. Our economy is going to grow dramatically. This is going to be wonderful for those that embrace it, I believe.
Okay. And then my last question is AI, as we all know, is just very energy intensive. I think the numbers have changed a little bit, but I understand a Google search versus a chat GPT question. The chat GPT question takes like 10 times the amount of energy. The amount of energy AI is going to consume, and Google and chat GPT and all these guys are building these huge server farms, right? What do you think? And we don't have enough energy in this country, in the world, to power all this. What do you think the answer is? Is it solar? Is it wind? Is it nuclear? Is it fossil fuels? What's your thoughts on that?
I'm an all of the above, but of course lean towards sustainable, renewable energy. To the extent, you look at just macro level, a country's GDP, if 10+% of that is going to fossil fuels, and instead you could pivot that and not spend that money, that's 10% that can go to defense and to education and to infrastructure and to other things. So from the standpoint of American strength, we should be pivoting faster. And I'm sure, like you've been able to travel, and you look at countries like China, right? Yes, they have coal plants, but they are going very heavy in solar and very heavy in renewables because it's going to strengthen their economy. So I think we should be doing the same. Yes, natural gas is a transitional fuel. It's better than coal. But let's put the dollars and cents in nuclear, right? Let's go to solar, to thermal, to tidal, to all of the above policy. And so that's what I'm a fan of. And I think you're going to see the efficiency of these AI models and data centers dramatically, reduce, just like you've seen with, efficiency of cars, right? How you get more miles per gallon, and the tech continues to improve.
Yep.
I think you mentioned nuclear. I think China's investing more in nuclear than they are in anything else.
Yeah,
yes.
They are. Yeah, I mean, it's almost 10 times the U.S. I feel like I've read as well.
Well, so I think that's a huge opportunity for us. Patrick, this has been great. You have such an interesting background and so diverse. Really enjoyed our time with you. Sax, what do you got?
Nothing, Patrick. We appreciate it as always. We're so excited about Togal and everything that you're building. If you enjoyed the pod today, please subscribe on our YouTube channel, share it with your friends. Tom and I will be back next week with another killer episode. But for today, it's sayonara. See you later. And we appreciate you guys being here.
Thank you guys for everything.
Folks. Thanks, Patrick. All the best.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for spending your time with Skin in the Game VC today. If you want to learn more about investing in early stage tech like a venture capitalist, be sure to visit the Florida Funders website at floridafunders.com. Join our angel network at no cost and get access to Florida Funders VC vetted investment opportunities in the next great breakout tech companies.